Alright, this is Language Studies Man again for Language Studies, and today we're going to have an intermediate lesson. And if you want to know why I chose to pick this lesson as the first intermediate lesson, is because the sooner I think that you are introduced to cases, the better it will be. So let me point out this is not a beginning lesson, and to understand this lesson you should already have some knowledge about the Russian language, and I'll get to more beginning lessons later. But that's not to say that if you're just beginning to learn Russian that you can't take a look at this and try to understand some of it. But just don't worry if you get a little bit confused. Okay, so it's going to be just an introduction to cases. We're not going to go into any of the cases in particular. We're just going to talk about each one of them really quickly. And so, what is a case? I wrote out here, and this is an okay definition, I guess. This one that I made up is that a case is a form or the form that a noun or adjective takes so that we know what its purpose in the sentence is. I just realized that I left out that in the sentence I wrote. But whatever. So it could also be a personal pronoun, a possessive pronoun, this, that, whatever. There's a lot of things that need to be put in cases in Russian. But basically the case tells you what role the noun plays in a sentence. So this would just be a real quick example. I'm just going to write a sentence up here. Let's just do this. The first word will be I, and the second word will be C, and the third word will be Jim, with an exclamation mark. Now what you should do first to realize which words are in cases, you should find the nouns. And so in a general sense, I is a noun, it's a pronoun, and Jim is a noun. And in English, we don't think about cases very much because we have a word order. But as you'll see, in Russian, they have cases. And so word order plays a less important role in the meaning of sentences. So I is the subject, and Jim is the direct object. At least if I were in English class, that's how I would learn this. And of course, C is a verb, so you don't need to worry about cases with verbs. But if this were Russian, some of these words might change depending on the case that it's in. So for example, in Russian, there's a case for the direct object. And so you would have to change this word a little bit, and we'll get into that. Alright, so in Russian there were 6 cases. Well, maybe there's 6.5, but we'll get into that half when we get into the accusative case. But there's the nominative, and that's the subject of the sentence, and that's the dictionary form. If you look up any noun or adjective, scratch that. If you look up any noun in the dictionary, what you're going to find is the noun is in the nominative case. And the nominative case is the form of the noun that you would use if it were the subject of the sentence. For example, you would say I instead of me as the subject of the sentence in English. For example, you might say, I like gummy bears, whereas me likes gummy bears doesn't make any sense. Then you have the next one, which I think is the next and most important one. I've listed these as from the most important to the least important. And this one is genitive. And if a word is in the genitive case, then that word you can think of it as having an of before it. So, for example, let's go back to I. For example, you would have I and be ya in Russian. Now, if you want to say of me, then it would be menya. So this one is I, and this one is of me. So you can see that sometimes, actually, a lot of times, most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, the word is going to change at least a little bit depending on the case. And the only exception to that would be in the accusative case. And sometimes masculine and neuter nouns do not change in the accusative case. But we won't talk about that right now. We'll talk about it more when we get into the accusative case. And the accusative case is the direct object of the sentence. So let's go back to that one example of I see Jim. It would of course be ya for I, and then C would be viju. And then Jim, because it's in the accusative case, takes a special ending. So let's just go ahead and write Jim for now. And the ending for this, in this case, would be, you'd add an A to it. And what this A tells to Russian speakers is that Jim is the one being seen, not the one seeing. So each case tells a Russian speaker something about the noun or preposition, or well, the noun or adjective in the sentence, not preposition. I'm sorry, I got a little bit confused. My tongue got away with me there. It started going faster than my brain could think. And my brain doesn't think very fast, so it's not very hard to do. Alright, and then the next one we have the dative, and that's the indirect object. Now in the dative, the indirect object in English is, let's say that you say, I threw the ball to Jim. I is the subject of the sentence, the ball is the direct object, and Jim is the indirect object. So what Russians do, instead of saying to, they just change the ending of the word Jim, of the name Jim. So just like the accusative, they would change Jim a little bit differently in order to show who the ball was being thrown to, without saying to. So basically, with the dative, a lot of times we can get rid of this word to. You don't have to say to him, to her, to us, to Jim. You can just put it in the dative case, and you automatically get rid of this word. I think that's pretty neat. So next we have the prepositional case. And this case is interesting because it's only used with 3 prepositions, in, on, and about. In Russian, that would be v, na, and about is o. So if you want to say inside, in something, on something, or about something, you would have to use these 3 prepositions, one of these 3 prepositions, and then the noun with its adjective, if it has one, in the prepositional case. So again, you would change the noun a little bit in a certain way in order to show that it's in the prepositional case. And then this last one is the instrumental case. It's the one that's not used as much as the other ones, but I think it's my favorite. Basically, it answers the question how something happens. And so a very common word that you would associate with how something happens is with. For example, you could say, how do you see? And of course you would say, with my eyes. So in the most general sense, if a Russian says, как ты видишь, which means how do you see, what you could do is you could take the word глаза, and all you do is take off the A and add an A, it seems really weird, but an M and an E, and say глазами, and it means with my eyes. I know it sounds kind of weird to take off the A and then add an A, but it's easier for me to think of it like that because there are going to be some words that aren't going to have an A at the end of it, and you're going to have to add an A to it. Okay, so let's think about it a little bit hypothetically. If let's say that English has cases, and English does have cases, but we don't really think about them too much. But let's say it does have cases, the same cases as Russian. So I'm going to give you a sentence. It says, I gave her a jar of peanut butter with my feet in the car. So what I want you to do is find the subject, the direct object, the indirect object, something with of, and then how something happens, and where something happens. Now, of course, the of is easy, the with something is easy, and where something happens is easy. So you would know that all of this right here would be in the genitive case. And if it's in the genitive case, then there is no of. With my feet would be in the instrumental case because it answers how. And then in the car would be the prepositional case because it's in, on, or about. So the only 2 that you really have to worry about would be the subject, it's the direct object, and the indirect object. So the subject is easy, it's I. So this would, if this were Russian, this would be the nominative. And then the tricky ones would be the indirect object and the direct object. So the indirect object would be to whom, and that would be her. It was given to her. And the direct object, what was given, would be a jar. So there you have it, the nominative, the indirect object, the direct object, genitive, instrumental, and prepositional. So let's go ahead and translate this real quick. If this were a girl, of course, it'd be dala. If I were a girl, but I'm not a girl, so it's ja dal je banku arachisovava masla nogami v mashinie. So ja is I, je is to her, banku is a jar, arachisovava masla is in the genitive case, so it's of peanut butter. Nogami is with my feet, or with feet. And then va mashinie, va is in, and mashinie is the car. So we're going to real quick go over this real quick again, just real quick, and what they mean. Okay, so ja, of course, is the nominative, and that just means I. Ye is in the dative, and that means to her. Ye in its nominative form is ana, which means she. So ana, meaning she, when it's turned into ye, means to her in the dative case. Same thing with banku is a jar, but its dictionary form is banka. So you can see how the a turns to the u, and that signifies, this u signifies that it's in the accusative case. And then arachisovava masla is in the genitive case. So this ava and then a, it means of. So arachisovaya masla means peanut butter, but with this ending on it, it means of peanut butter. And then nagami is with feet or with my feet. And the nominative case, nogi is plural, and this means feet. So you change this and add the ame, ame, and you get with feet. And then the prepositional, remember the prepositional always has to have a preposition with it, either va, na, or o. And so that's why I wrote the prepositional with this. But as you can see, in the nominative case, in the dictionary form, it's machina. So if car, machina, were the subject of the sentence, it wouldn't change. But because it's in the prepositional case, we take off the a and we put a ye on it. And then that means in the car. So I hope that makes some sense. Remember, I haven't gone into each of the specific cases, and each of the specific cases has its own special endings. All I really wanted to do with this video is to show you how nouns change and what the purpose of cases is. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And I hope this helped. So like always, love life and study hard.